So, in advance of yesterday's verdict, what was the left doing? What was the Biden campaign engaged in? Hmm. From the commencement speech that Mr. 10% gave at Morehouse College to his wife's appearance on The View
To
to,
him rallying up the black votes in Philadelphia
yeah,
with a big drum band.
with this appeal.
What do you think he would have done on January 6th if black Americans had stormed it? Think about this. What do you think would have happened if black Americans had stormed the Capitol? I don't think he'd be talking about pardons. It's the same guy who wanted to tear gas you as you peacefully protested George Floyd's murder. The same guy who still calls the Central Park Five.
Yeah, we don't, yeah, the example after example, but the audience response, like at Morehouse College, was rather muted, partly because of sort of the inartful, dare I say, dog whistling that Joe Biden is doing, the obsequious, patronizing way in which he is making an appeal for the black voters he's lost to come back home.
That doesn't work.
And part of it too is I don't know what's happening in these big cities, which a disproportionate percentage of black Americans live, urban centers. And since you mentioned George Floyd, and we were treated to all these George Floyd remembrances a week ago, including a virtual riot in New York City where people are arrested, violence during the George Floyd Remembrance Parade. How ironic. What's tragically ironic is the death of Jamal Mitchell, the murder of Minneapolis police officer Jamal Mitchell yesterday, killed in an ambush shooting. Somebody called, pretended to be a shooting victim. Officers arrived. He opened fire.
And the gunman's dead, too, now.
4 dead, including Minneapolis police officer Jamal Mitchell, who, by the way, is a black gentleman.
Yeah, he was on the force for about a year and a half.
So
people loved him.
This is where it gets really interesting and complicated in terms of the impact of the Trump conviction politically, is because of all the dynamics where people actually live, and not just the proverbial Republican talking point on inflation, but really in terms of quality of life, and particularly for those in urban centers, the lack of public safety. And the answer is sort of Trump is a racist. My appeal for you to stay with me or come back to me is the other guy's a racist. But the other guy's a known quantity. And the other guy was the same guy who made a commitment to historically black colleges and signed the Second Chances Act. And so it's just becoming a tougher and tougher sell. And it's sort of revealed in those moments those rare moments where Biden is actually on the campaign trail and he's trying to make that appeal, and he's getting basically crickets in response. So can those untraditional and perhaps just in this fleeting moment, well, we don't know, Republicans or those Trump supporters from minority communities hailing from urban centers more than make up for any squishy, low information suburban voters who may be moved by the onslaught of we can't have a convicted felon in the White House that is to come. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Rich Lowry, editor of National Review, author of The Case for Nationalism, How It Made Us Powerful, United, and Free. Rich, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So all this time, Republicans have been trying to figure out a way to bring more minority families into our ranks. And now we have people like Greg Abbott leading the way by instituting discipline in his own party with respect to promotion of school choice in Texas, and that will disproportionately benefit lower and middle income Latino families, which is a significant population in Texas, of course. And we have this dynamic within the black community, particularly with black men, according to polling, where younger generation black Americans are just not buying this race hustle rap that Joe Biden and the Democrats continue to sell. I mean, is it possible that we could have, as I was saying, black and Latino families in urban centers more than make up for the suburban problem that Trump in particular has?
Yeah, it's possible. I would say the Latino thing, I have more faith in the Latino thing than in the black voters, just because the Latino thing is a trend. Trump lost by 40 points, Latino voters, to Hillary in 16, then 23 points to Biden, and he's obviously going to do better than that. And we see it in the state level polling in Arizona and Nevada, where he's doing much better than he is in the blue wall states. Still ahead in most polls in the blue wall states, but in Arizona he's ahead about 5, and Nevada you can't get him a poll finding him leading by less than 9 or 10. It's really extraordinary. So, but the black thing could be real too. There's a Wall Street Journal poll a month or so ago that showed, I think it was 30% of black men definitely voting for Trump or considering voting for Trump. Now, that feels high to me, but clearly this is a real thing, or the Biden people wouldn't be as freaked out over it. And Trump doesn't really need black voters to vote for him. He just needs them to sit it out. If turnout's not as high in Philadelphia as it usually is, he could win Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania could be the whole election. And the final irony, Biden is holding up in the blue wall states because the blue wall states are whiter and older than the Sun Belt states.
Right.
Which if you said this at any other time, the Republicans are going to struggle because there's so many old white voters in those states. He's doing much better with the more heavily minority states. You would say, what? You're crazy.
That's a great point. No, it's a great point. I mean, that's exactly, well, that's what's happened to the suburbs, and that's how urban centers, the suburbs surrounding urban centers like Milwaukee and Chicago have, gone south so quickly over the last decade.
Yeah, and it's also it's a rejection of the left. So just think again, the example of a Latino hard hat construction worker. Is that guy woke? Right? He may not agree with us on most things, but he's not woke. And the way I think about it, if you ask the average Latino male, are you with an traditional FDR Democrat or the average Republican? They're with that FDR Democrat who is patriotic, who had traditional virtues, values, and just wanted a bigger government, right? But if you ask them, are you with a woke Democrat or the average Republican, then they're like, no, I'm probably with the average Republican. I think that's what's happened. And Trump's not the average Republican also. It's not as though you're voting for Mitt Romney. You're voting for this guy who has this image of strength, who's can be kind of crude, who speaks in a plain-spoken way. And I think especially a lot of working class males, black and Latino, are like I like that guy.
Yeah, for sure. Trump has a press conference today to offer more commentary on what happened and what's going to happen. What do you think he should say? How should he position himself after yesterday?
Well, I think what he said briefly after the verdict yesterday was appropriate. I mean, it was rigged. It's a rigged process from beginning to end, and he has to make the case that this is a political prosecution. A lot of polling has showed more than 50% believe that. Now, they also believe Trump did something wrong, so the public's a little ambiguous, which why I think it'll ultimately be a wash. And then pivot to the election, right? I mean, he should use these bully pulpit moments to, he has to defend himself in this case, but then talk about inflation, talk about the border, talk about the things people really care about.
Now, a lot of people are still processing what happened yesterday. What do you understand the crime to be?
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
That's a question?
Yeah.
And we don't know the answer to it. So, there's the business records, which were allegedly falsified. I say allegedly because I think there's an arguable case that they were correct. I mean, Cohen was a lawyer. This is the kind of agreement a lawyer forges for you. But let's say they're false. There still needs to be an intent to defraud. And who is being defrauded by this? No one. And then it has to be a felony because there's a second crime, which, there's a Chinese menu. Maybe it's misleading the tax authorities. Maybe it's a violation of federal campaign finance law. Maybe it's a violation of New York campaign finance law. And we don't know. Donald Trump was found guilty of 34 felonies, and we don't know entirely what he was guilty of. That's crazy. That's against every principle of Anglo-American legal system has developed over the centuries. So I think this thing will fail on appeal, but not until 2025 or 2026. And they just wanted that convicted felon label on him, which unfortunately now they got.
Do you think this the conviction impacts the decision he makes for his running mate in any way?
I don't think so. I kind of think going back to the first part of our conversation, Marco Rubio would be the strongest politically because he can go to those Latino voters and campaign in Spanish, and has a background that resonates with them. But the problem is you can't have two people from Florida. Now there's some argument that you just can't have two people from the same state when the electors meet, which is in December 14th. So Rubio could stay in Florida, Trump could stay in Florida, and then if they win, Rubio can resign from the Senate and move to Nashville for a month or whatever it is.
Or Trump could establish residency in New Jersey or something, right?
Yeah, I don't think Trump would. He wants to be the top dog, so I don't think he'd be the one to move. But anyway, it would create sort of legitimacy questions and arguments that this Rubio's not really qualified. So I think that this makes it a little harder because you could have people saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm not sure we've heard it yet, but he's a convicted felon; they can't be on the ballot in state X or state Y." So I don't think he's going to want the further static. So maybe at the margins it affects the Veep choice that was for Rubio in particular, but I'm not sure it does with anyone else.
Who do you think he's going to pick?
I don't know. I kind of think. It wouldn't shock me if the names we've heard, none of them are picked, right? It would be a classic Trump thing. He likes the drama, he likes the theater, and it may be that Doug Burgum, who just based on chatter, might be the favorite at the moment, is in the worst possible position because he's just being used as the shiny object. But you hear about Burgum, and then there are four senators, Tom Cotton, whom I really admire, Marco, who we talked about, J.D. Vance, who I wouldn't sleep on, and Tim Scott. Again, I think Marco, the Florida residency aside, would be the strongest politically. I would like Cotton most, sort of substantively, being there and being ready to be president, but it could be someone else.
Rich Lowry, editor of National Review, author of The Case for Nationalism, How It Made Us Powerful, United, and Free. Rich, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Parents, grandparents, you might want to be sitting down because this is amazing news. Imagine the student in your family not asking you for money to pay for college, or better yet, not getting into years and years of debt. How's this possible? Scholarship